Hey, fans of old archival films, I found a nice little gem recently at the National Archives. It's an 8-minute profile by the United States Information Service of Edith Sampson, somebody I'd never heard of before, who was the first African-American delegate to the United Nations. And she was also a lawyer in Chicago, a humanitarian, quite an interesting person. They squeeze a lot of information into this 8 minutes, including excerpt of a speech she gave for a committee of the United Nations, which is really quite amazing. She talks about the rights that people should have all over the world. So please watch and share and enjoy this short little film that I found that's in the public domain. It belongs to all of us. It was created by the U.S. government. And while we still can, I'm going to the National Archives and finding things like this and sharing them with you as a public service. So if you like that, please share this video, please subscribe, please tell people you know to subscribe to our channel. And here is Edith Sampson, important, amazing person in 8 minutes of nice, compact storytelling.
From United Nations headquarters comes the story of a woman who sits in the General Assembly as a representative of the United States. Her name is Edith Sampson, housewife, social worker, lawyer, domestic relations expert, and now alternate U.S. delegate to the United Nations General Assembly. Welcomed to her new post by Secretary of State Dean Acheson and Chief Delegate Warren Austin, Mrs. Sampson was named to serve on the important Committee for Social, Humanitarian, and Cultural Relations, to study the welfare and rehabilitation needs of nations still ravaged by war. Addressing the committee, she said,
Mr. Chairman, fellow delegates, most of my life, I have lived and worked on the south side of Chicago. From this vantage point, I have learned something about the word security. As a social worker and a lawyer, I have long listened to the problems of ordinary people. Security means something very real and very personal to them. It means opportunity to work and advance in their work, to educate their children, to be safe in their homes and on the streets, to be safeguarded in their health, to be secure and independent in their old age, to have their savings safe in the bank and worth something a year or 10 years hence, to be free to think what they please and to say what they think, and to join free associations to protect and advance their interests as workers or farmers, businessmen, or professional people, to be assured of fair trial with all that implies, to be free to worship God according to conscience. And security also means an effective defense of all these things against aggression. Peace has to be built from the bottom up. That means to me that we should vastly expand our people-to-people exchanges along the line of the round-the-world trip I took with leaders of various organizations in 1949. The unity we are seeking is of peoples as well as governments. The airplane, the radio, films, and the free press, including our own organization's publications, are modern instruments for building a people's front against aggression and for world development. Let's use them with all the energy and imagination we can muster. Our reply to censorship should not be the mere absence of obstruction to the free flow of ideas, but the positive stimulation of every form of communication. Our answer to the Iron Curtain must be the opened house.
The real story of this remarkable woman began in the great Midwestern city of Chicago, Illinois. Concerned with the problem of earning her own living, Mrs. Sampson was obliged to work while completing her studies. Today, Mrs. Sampson and her husband, who is also an attorney, own this home on Chicago's South Side. A quiet, resourceful, and deeply religious woman, Mrs. Sampson wanted to help others. She studied and became a social worker. It was while carrying on this work that she discovered an unusual aptitude for law. For 18 years, she left her home each morning to serve on the bench of Chicago's busy juvenile court, devoting her life to children whose plight was no stranger to one also born in poverty. Mrs. Sampson's law office in Chicago is well known to the thousands who come to her as confidant and friend. Specializing in criminal law and domestic relations, this amazing 48-year-old woman was one of Chicago's busiest lawyers before representing the United States at the United Nations organization. She is widely respected and has many friends high in the political life of the city. For with her wide and varied experience, she has been in great demand. Her clients have come from all walks of life. Ever mindful of her own impoverished childhood, Edith Sampson always has taken a keen interest in the problems of those who have come to her for help. She always has been deeply concerned with the plight of those whose early struggles are reminiscent of her own. Chicago's Loyola University is justly proud of its distinguished alumna. For here Edith Sampson won her master's degree and went on to study at John Marshall Law School, where she passed the rigid examination that admitted her to the bar. And Edith Sampson had been too poor to enjoy the schooling that children normally have. Her record of achievement is brilliant. From juvenile court to assistant state's attorney, and in 1934 admitted to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States. If you happen to call at the Sampson home on 38th Street, Chicago, when she is not on duty at the UN, you'd more than likely find an interesting group. Friends and neighbors like to drop in and discuss with her the topics of the day. Well-read and well-versed in world affairs, Mrs. Sampson brings to the conversation a broad and intelligent understanding of international problems. She is greatly in demand as a public speaker and is invited to participate in forum discussions all over the country. Often she'll slip away to her own room and jot down ideas that may have come to her through these friendly fireside discussions. She still remembers how to use the typewriter from the days when she was unable to pay the salary of a secretary. It is perhaps these simple, unpretentious qualities that have made Edith Sampson a valuable member of the United States team in its efforts to create better understanding among the peoples of the earth. In her own kitchen, Mrs. Sampson has a cook who has been with her for years, but she still likes to prepare and sample her own dishes whenever she has the time. Like any good housewife, she puts up her own jellies and preserves, is justly proud that she has never lost her culinary skill. To her own little nieces and nephews, and the kids who live next door, she is Aunt Edith, a most glamorous figure in their young eyes. For Aunt Edith not only plays the piano and tells them stories, she has been around the world and has a photograph album to prove it. As a member of radio's World Town Hall of the Air, Mrs. Sampson recently visited more than 20 countries. Speaking before audiences all over the world, she described American life from the Negro's point of view, attempted to correct some of the erroneous impressions about the life of the Negro in America, pointed to herself as an example of the opportunities in the United States for people of all races and creeds. Edith Sampson has left her lucrative law practice to answer her country's call. Unselfishly, she is making an important contribution to those who are working to bring peace and order to a chaotic world.